Those were the words barked at me by my manager, Richard, as he stood over my desk with a smug, self-satisfied grin. It was 4:45 p.m. on a Friday, exactly 48 hours before the annual executive bonuses were finalized and wired to employee accounts. I had spent 12 brutal months securing our firm's largest infrastructure contract, a deal that generated $7 million in revenue and earned me a guaranteed $50,000 performance bonus. Richard hadn't written a single line of code or managed a single client call, but by firing me for gross incompetence 2 days early, my entire bonus pool was automatically forfeited back to the department budget, which Richard controlled. Before we get into how Richard's little scheme completely backfired, please take a quick second to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on all notifications. It really helps the channel grow, and you won't miss a single story of legal justice. Now, let's jump right back into the moment my career was handed to me in a cardboard box. My name is Marcus. For 6 years, I worked as the senior systems architect for a mid-sized financial tech firm in downtown Chicago. When I first joined the company, our data pipelines were an absolute mess. Servers crashed weekly, compliance audits were a nightmare, and client data was held together by digital tape. Over 4 years, I single-handedly redesigned our entire enterprise network architecture from the ground up. I built a custom, proprietary security framework that automated our compliance, reporting, and protected millions of dollars in daily transactions. I gave everything to that company. I worked 80-hour weeks, skipped family vacations, and ate cold takeout at my desk at 2 a.m. while patching server vulnerabilities. The previous VP of operations had always recognized my worth and promised me that once the big client migration was complete, my hard work would be reflected in my annual compensation package. Then, 8 months ago, that VP retired, and Richard was brought in from an outside firm to streamline costs. Richard was the classic corporate ladder climber, immaculate tailored suits, expensive watches paid for on company expense accounts, and zero technical knowledge. He treated the engineering team like factory laborers and spent his days taking executive board members out for lavish golf games. Within 2 months of his arrival, Richard realized that the department's bonus structure was tied directly to net operational savings. If he could cut departmental expenses, his own executive payout would skyrocket. He started by quietly reclassifying project milestones, taking credit for system rollouts my team had executed, and cutting our software maintenance budgets to pad his own numbers. But I kept my head down. I knew the numbers didn't lie, and my contract explicitly stated that securing the new international banking integration would trigger a $50,000 performance bonus payable on December 15th. On December 13th, I finalized the last system integration, passing every regulatory security check with flying colors. I printed out the sign-off sheets, placed them on Richard's desk, and went back to my office to wrap up my end-of-year reports. 10 minutes later, Richard called me into his office. Beside him sat a nervous HR representative holding a manila folder. "Marcus," Richard said, leaning back in his leather chair with his hands folded behind his head. "We're letting you go, effective immediately. We've conducted an internal audit and found serious irregularities. In your network management, we're citing you for gross negligence." I stood there frozen. Gross negligence? Richard, I just handed you the compliance sign-off for the largest contract in this company's history. The network is running at 99.9% uptime. "The decision is final," Richard said smoothly, sliding a termination paper across the desk. "Because you are being terminated for cause. Your accrued PTO and all pending performance bonuses are null and void under company policy. Sign this release form waiving your right to sue, and we'll offer you 2 weeks of discretionary severance." I looked at the paper, then looked at Richard's eyes. There was no actual audit. There were no irregularities. He had deliberately timed this termination to steal my $50,000 bonus and absorb it into his department budget, right? Before the fiscal deadline. He thought I was trapped, that I needed his reference and would weekly sign the paper out of fear and desperation. "I'm not signing that," I said quietly. Richard's smile turned razor thin. "Then you leave with nothing, Marcus. Security is waiting at your desk. You have 10 minutes. I walked back to my office, my blood cold. Co-workers watched in stunned silence as I packed my personal coffee mug, a framed photo of my wife, and my desk notebook into a small cardboard box. Richard stood at the end of the hallway, watching me with his arms crossed, making sure I didn't touch my desktop computer. He thought he had trapped me. He thought he had taken everything I worked for. What Richard didn't know, what he was far too ignorant about technology to ever realize, was how my custom security framework actually functioned. I didn't need to touch my desktop computer to change the future of that company. As I packed my coat, I reached into my pocket, felt the cold metal of my personal flash drive, and remembered the master authentication key I had registered in my own name 3 years ago.